keep eating chalk, please stop, dear God.
Oh, that's the good stuff. To tell this story, we have to start at the dawn of mankind, and I want you to know from the deepest bottom of my heart that I want you to go fuck yourself. Where did civilization come from? Geographically, what caused some people to settle down and grow crops and pay taxes, and others to continue to live in small tribes of hunter-gatherers? Well, civilization began where the aliens decided to land, which just so happened to be in river valleys. I know you can't read the board. I don't give a shit. Now, what separates the Chad River Valley from the Virgin River is that the ice and snow on the mountains upstream of this river will melt in the warmer months and flow out to sea, causing the river itself to rise and deposit fresh, fertile soil on both banks. Before kids these days and their TikToks and their iPhones and their irrigation and their fertilizer, going from picking berries and fucking in bushes to a sedentary life of doing agriculture and paying taxes, it was difficult. Civilization naturally began in these places because these are the easiest places for it to begin. The Yellow River in China, the Indus River in India, the Nile in Egypt, and the Tigris and the Euphrates in Mesopotamia are where agriculture and civilization began and spread. So if you're looking to assign blame somewhere, these are the fucking places. I got their numbers. These places produced so much food, it allowed for people to specialize into other roles besides berry picker or elk clubber. Now you had these entire segments of society that could do things other than find, grow, or hunt for food. Now you had bureaucrats, religious leaders, scribes, artisans, YouTubers. But not every river valley was created equal. This area, formed by the Nile and the Tigris and the Euphrates, is what we call the Fertile Crescent. And while China and India would, of course, go on to influence the broader world with gunpowder and curry respectively, the Fertile Crescent shaped your world far more, viewer. The Fertile Crescent was the crossroads of the world, the center of the human universe, and the location of the oldest existing evidence of human civilization. This was built during the Ice Age.
But wait! There's more!
Trade between Africa, India, China, and Europe would all pass through this vital choke point, allowing for an exchange of ideas and technology, and also taxes. Once again, taxes. While the Fertile Crescent would decline environmentally over time, the entire region would gain new importance as the choke point on the Silk Road, and whoever controlled it would control all the wealth that passed through it. You will find, historically, that great powers would end up controlling the Fertile Crescent. Its advantages were too numerous. It was a verifiable food factory at the crossroads of the world, which allowed you to control and tax trade. But it was also too open to invasion. It was simply too precious and too difficult of a resource to control, unless you were a civilization which cracked skulls like they were piñatas at a diabetic Mexican kid's birthday party. The Fertile Crescent is where Homo sapiens became human, where gods whose names we've forgotten were discovered and eaten by time, where blood was spilled and cultures were created and erased. This is a land where there were no kings, only kings of kings. These three rivers, in their incredible capacity to feed empires which lay at the crossroads of the world, was the source of power for numerous great civilizations. Persia, the Umayyad Empire, the Abbasid Empire, the Ottoman Empire. All of them fearsome and learned and influential in different ways. But this tale I'm going to tell you today isn't about any of those empires. This is a tale of two empires. The border which they shared, and the world which they couldn't. You ever have one of those moments where you just sort of question everything you've ever done and the person you've tried so hard and got so... Enough of the circus. It's time to get to business. Persia! It was a place, and it was the largest empire to ever exist when it was established. The aforementioned ancient civilizations of Egypt and the Mesopotamian kingdoms were for the first time under one government. And the Persian emperor would even take the title of King of Kings. You know, in case someone forgot that he was better than them. It happens. Most of Persian territory would be won by a legendary figure in Persian history named Cyrus the Great. The Persian Empire would rule the Fertile Crescent and the lands beyond for hundreds of years until, famously, they invaded Greece and lost. And I would like to make something very clear. The day Persia invaded Greece was the most important day in Greek history. In Persian history, it was Tuesday. While Persia would fail to conquer Greece, this failure was hardly the end. The Persians would continue to rule their vast empire for 150 more years after they lost to the cat boys in Athens and the cat men in Sparta. That was until Alexander the Great conquered all of Persia and beyond. The ramifications of Alexander's conquest would shape the future of the Mediterranean, the Fertile Crescent, and the world for centuries to come. But he didn't get to enjoy any of that, because he died very young, leaving his generals to fight over the remains of his empire. What used to be Egypt became the Ptolemaic Empire, and what used to be the majority of Persia became the Seleucid Empire. These were the most powerful civilizations on Earth, and they, most intelligently and wisely, decided to use their advanced knowledge of warfare, logistics, and vast resources to murder each other for hundreds of years and for zero gain whatsoever. This is what is known as the European method of empire management. Now, during the time of Alexander's conquest and the creation of these successor kingdoms, Rome was a regional power at the edge of the civilized world. And Parthia was a small satrapy, which is essentially a province. It's old Persian system of government. You don't gotta worry about that. Who cares? It's fine. Rome and Parthia occupied small and remote parts of this world of big players. But you know who Rome is. They were the guys with the skirts that did what the thing with the big building. I know history. But who the fuck, or what the fuck, was Parthia or Parthians? Because that actually is a question that needs to be answered. Persia and Parthia were two of the great others that shaped the limits of the Greco-Roman world. Persia invokes 1,000 images derived from school textbooks and old movies, most often the image of a huge slave-based empire that sought to crush the freedom of Athens and the bravery of Sparta. A corrupt despotism that was overthrown by the heroic if murderous Alexander the Great. Parthia invokes much less, usually a null result from many public databases, and one or two dated books in local library catalogs, with the exception of academic writing, mainly on the Roman East. Don't worry, I've dug into this, I've put in the legwork, and am now an expert in all things Parthian. The Parthians were a semi-nomadic people from the steppe east of the Caspian Sea, most likely descended from the Scythian people there. Scythian, I did put in the fucking legwork. Now this is a very important part of who Parthia was. Alright, you find me an advanced, powerful, and massive empire, and I'll show you some nomadic Asian steppe tribe that would blast their asses every few decades or so with ridiculously skilled archery and swift cavalry. 2 words to best summarize who Parthians were. They were Diet Mongols. To quote from a late 19th century historian, don't worry, I cut out all the N-words. Like the Seljuk Turks and Tatar tribes, the Parthians passed almost their whole lives on horseback, conversing, transacting business, buying and selling, even eating, while mounted on their horses. This is very important to how the Romans and Parthians would later interact, mostly because they interacted by way of murder. And the Romans, well, they weren't too big on cavalry. While there was a socio-economic class of Romans known as equites, who owned horses and had a more privileged position in society, you could compare them to the knights of medieval Europe if you were trying to explain hundreds of years of complicated history in 1 hour and didn't mind pissing off pedantic Romaboos on YouTube. Unfortunately for me, that is 99% of my audience. The last 1% is my mother. Roman military focus was primarily on heavy infantry. The Roman bread and butter was always throwing men into a meat grinder. And if you include horses in there, well, it just gums up the gears. It It was very common, in fact, for the Romans to hire mercenary cavalry or use cavalry provided by allies. While the Seleucid Empire and Ptolemaic Empire and, Macedon sometimes, were busy murdering the fuck out of each other, Rome conquered the western Mediterranean, and Parthia achieved independence during a moment of Seleucid weakness. The Romans then attacked Macedon. This was a big problem for the Seleucids, as the Seleucids were allied with Macedon against the Ptolemies. Now, you may be able to suss out who won the war between Rome and the Seleucid Empire without me needing to tell you. Alright, Macedon, it's become clear we can't take Egypt alone. But now that we're allies, we will crush them beneath our sandals. And the true inheritors to Alexander's kingdom will finally unite. Who the fuck are you? The Seleucids were pushed out of Anatolia, which is modern-day Turkey, and Rome installed myriad puppet kingdoms, further solidifying their power in the east. This set off a prolonged period of Parthian expansion. With Rome in the west and Parthia in the east, the Seleucid Empire started getting Eiffel Towered. I don't know if I can say that. Famously, in a desperate attempt to re-establish control in the Mediterranean, the Seleucid king, Antiochus, every fucking Eastern king is named like Antiochus or Mithridates. I fucking hate it. There's gonna be like 10 of them. Antiochus launched a successful attack on the Ptolemaic Empire, but at this point, the Ptolemaic Empire was basically a Roman puppet state. This invasion was not stopped by a Roman general with an army at his back, but a Roman diplomat. So this Roman diplomat drew a circle in the sand around this king of a great empire founded by Alexander the Great. Who gives a fuck? And this diplomat told Antiochus that if he crossed that line, or annexed Egypt, he'd be declaring war on Rome. He didn't. Rome and Parthia had never interacted directly at this point, but their stories had become intertwined through the prolonged disintegration of the once formidable Seleucid Empire at both of their hands. Roman success begat Parthian success, and vice versa. Upon the death of Antiochus, aforementioned circle cuck, the Seleucid Empire by all rights should have passed to his eldest son, Demetrius, but he was a hostage of the Roman Senate, who refused to release him. Can I go be king now? Well, if you're not there, who will the throne pass to? I guess my 9-year-old little brother. Would we rather have a competent adult man who hates us in charge of the Seleucid Empire, or a little boy? Wow, that's a tough call, huh? Come on, man, who the fuck do you think I am, Hannibal? Are you Hannibal? What? No, why are you still so scared of him? He's been dead for decades. Alright, well, we're not letting you go until we've made sure you're not Hannibal. It is well known that Hannibal had acidic blood which would melt a knife, so we're just gonna run some tests on you first. Get that knife away from me, you fucking lunatic! Scared of being cut open, huh? Sounds pretty Hannibal-y to me. So the throne instead passed to a 9-year-old boy. Antiochus, another Antiochus, the king of Parthia, Mithridates, I wanna fucking die, launched a huge offensive when he sensed this weakness, and whooped the ever-loving shit out of this boy king of the once proud Seleucid Empire. Demetrius would later escape and take his throne by killing his brother. Classic. But the Parthian advance was too far along. The Seleucid Empire would never recover. Macedon was now gone, and the Ptolemaic Empire was a shadow of its former self. They barely had enough eyeliner to sustain themselves. And they were basically a Roman puppet at this point. The world that was once ruled by the empires Alexander the Great had left behind had been almost totally eaten by two small kingdoms on opposite sides of the world who, against all odds, had forged great empires of their own. Trapped between immovable legions and unstoppable cavalry, the Seleucid Empire was reduced to another pawn on the ancient chessboard. By 140 BC, the Romans had advanced to the Aegean, and the Parthians to the Euphrates. Between them lay the rump of the Seleucid Empire, sandwiched between two aggressive powers, an ailing Ptolemaic Egypt and a host of smaller kingdoms. The new world order of Rome and Parthia had been established. With all of these massive changes, the Near East had become destabilized. A where we droppin' boys level of destabilization, and unfortunately, no one knew what oil was yet. So America didn't show up to fix everything with unspeakable violence. Now, many kingdoms and empires were vying for domination during this period. Rome, Pontus, Armenia, what was left of the Seleucids, the Parthians, and of, the Ptolemaic Empire, they were just sitting there, hanging out. This is the shape of the world around 80 BC, and it is around 60 years before this time that we first know for a fact that Chinese embassies visited the Parthian court, as Parthia sat directly upon the Silk Road. Trade between Rome and the East would forever flavor their relationship, as all trade from India and China had to pass through their empire. Now, during this period of chaos in the East, we are also entering a period of chaos in Rome. At this point in the story, we are entering the last 50 years of the Roman Republic, as the political system would be stressed to its breaking point by wealth inequality and increasingly normalized political violence. That sounds like that sucks. I can't relate. The political violence largely centered around the two political factions, but do bear in mind, these were sort of broad political movements, not real political parties like we have today. You could divide these two movements into a left-wing and a right-wing thing as well, if we're going to apply modern political theory to, a people that shit in a semicircle, looking each other in the eyes, they wipe their asses with a sponge on a stick. But the fact is that left-wing, right-wing paradigm was a French invention from the Revolutionary period, as the French invented relative directions. I've been looking at that joke in my script for like 2 weeks. I've been trying to convince myself it's funny. The Optimates, I only read these words, were the more conservative faction who hated poor people, and the Populares were the progressive faction who also hated poor people, but understood the benefits of lying. This conflict had been largely constrained to limited political violence and arguments between, old men, until the powder keg in the east blew. Sulla, an Optimate, was chosen to lead the counterattack against Pontus, following their invasion of Roman Greece and Anatolia, which is modern-day Turkey. However, a tribune of the plebs, a populare, vetoed Sulla's appointment as commander of this offensive because it was an appointment sure to bring glory and riches to whoever led the campaign. Sorry, Sulla, the command has been taken from you and given to Gaius Marius. Time to give up your legions. I see. Well, I'm a learned man, Tribune. I've read much of Aristotle, and mastered the fine art of lively debate. I've no doubt I can convince you to let me keep my legions. You see, did Herodotus not say in his histories on the matter of human nature, "Give me what I want, or I'm going to kill you"? Oh, well, I don't remember that part of... Oh, I get it. So Rome had the first of many civil wars, which would bring about the fall of the Republic and the rise of the Empire. But it was Eastern conflict, caused in part by Parthia, which got the ball rolling. Sulla, in the end, fought a civil war on one side and a war with Pontus on the other, and he won both. Now, notably, this is the first time that a Roman would ever meet a Parthian on record, and rest assured, it is hilarious. Sulla was present when the Parthian king, Mithridates, sent a diplomat by the name of Orodes to meet with the king of Cappadocia. Sulla sat in the middle of the room, establishing that he would be running the negotiations between these two civilizations uninvited, and it was naturally insulting to the Parthian envoy. Greetings, Roman. I come from the great Parthian Empire, the successors to the Persian Empire, an envoy of King of Kings. Mithridates, the barbarian, says what? What? Loser. Anyway, your Greek sounds like shit, but I've never respected the language anyway, to be honest. I think it's hard to nail the pronunciations without a little boy's dick in your mouth. I don't think our people are going to get along. You consider yourselves people? Now, the Romans were good at several things. Shitting in a circle. Pulling off a tasteful skirt. But they were never good at diplomacy. By sitting in the middle, Sulla made it clear that Rome was to be the dominant party at the talks. At the time, some people commended Sulla for the airs which he assumed with the barbarians, while others accused him of vulgarity and ill-timed arrogance. The Parthians would certainly have been offended by Rome's worldview, which placed even the most powerful neighbors on an inferior level. There seems to be no doubt in the Parthian king's mind about what happened. The king put his ambassador to death for suffering Sulla to take the seat of honor. Following the civil war, Sulla would take an old office only to be used in times of emergency, the office of dictator, which was what it sounded like. Sulla set a precedent where, guys would just be like, whoa, oh my god, there's an emergency, oh my god, the Republic is falling apart, I'm not in charge. How can we possibly function as a people if I don't get all the shit? Now, two figures emerged from Sulla's civil war and dictatorship, very successful, and these two men would come to define Roman politics and the Republic's downfall. Once Sulla retired from his dictatorship to go smoke dope and drink 40s with prostitutes at his villa. That is not a joke. That man was a thug. Literally just got bored of being dictator and decided to party to death. How do I still not know how a fucking chalkboard works? The first of these figures was Pompey, and he became successful the good old-fashioned Roman way. He achieved many military successes, and would later leverage these victories and an army posted outside Rome's walls during the election to become one of Rome's 2 consuls in the year 70 BC. Bear in mind that consul was the highest office a Roman could achieve. They served for a year, and there were always 2 of them at a time. Now, the second figure who emerged from Sulla's battle royale was Crassus. Now, Crassus was not incompetent militarily or anything like that. He ended up putting down the Spartacus slave revolt and won the Battle of Colline Gate during Sulla's civil war, but these things were not what made him a significant political figure. When Sulla had completed his civil war, he famously put his political enemies on lists, which meant they would be murdered. And this might shock you. A guy like Sulla had a lot of fucking enemies. Now, their property would be confiscated by the state and sold at auction. And Crassus, he looked at these lists. The tangible manifestation of the failure of the Roman Republic. And he said, wow, this looks like a really good investment opportunity. Crassus would leverage his incredible wealth and his own army posted outside the walls during the election to become the second consul in 70 BC. No one ran against the 2 men. Once again, armies. Now, you'd think Crassus and Pompey, both being Sulla's men, would get along. Haha, no, they fucking hated each other. Now, Crassus and Pompey were at this time basically on similar footing politically. But that all changed when Pompey was dispatched with his legions to the still turbulent east. Pompey's settlement in the east was quite masterly. It established a ring of wealthy provinces on the Mediterranean, and then put in place a range of client kingdoms as buffer states to the east and south against the growing power of the Parthians. Now, for these many successes, Pompey got to start calling himself Magnus the Great, and of course he got a triumph. The Romans began to know the Parthians around this period, but only in the vaguest of terms. The Romans knew, for example, that Parthians spoke a very vulgar Greek from Sulla's interactions with their diplomat and the writing on their coins. These coins were beginning to find their way into Rome due to trade. To quote from Crassus by Peter Stothard, Roman traders in silk and slaves knew the bronze Parthian drachmas with their ill-spelled Greek inscriptions, their changing heads, and the unchanging archer who sat on every reverse. But Parthians were still barbarians in borrowed clothes. Jump cut. Hello, it's been several days since that last portion was recorded. As you can tell from my slightly longer, terrible beard, the lighter shade of gray in my shirt, and, of course, the slightly more pronounced tinge of madness in my eyes. This was a period of upheaval in Parthian politics, but do bear in mind, Parthia was a monarchy, so there wasn't any arguing by old dudes in togas, just war. Notably, during Pompey's wars in the east, there was a civil war in Parthia. King Phraates was killed, presumably by his 2 sons. It's good for siblings to bond. Orodes and Mithridates then went on to celebrate the death of their father by trying to kill each other. Mithridates, thank God, lost this war, fell back to Roman Syria. Mithridates would then re-enter Parthia with a small amount of Roman support at his back, but he'd lose again and just get imprisoned in Seleucia. The Parthians, unlike the Romans, did not write their own histories, so we do not know what Orodes would have thought of this Roman meddling in his affairs, but we can only imagine. It is during this time that we also know for a fact that Parthians entered the city of Rome itself in chains. The daughter and granddaughter of former king and current corpse Phraates were both married off to the Armenian king Pompey deposed. As a result of this, they were in Pompey's triumphal parade once he returned from his eastern conquests. But what was Crassus up to during Pompey's time abroad? Well, he was being a good politician, He was, winning hearts and minds. Oh my god, my house is on fire! Oh, is it? Well, I just so happen to have a gaggle of burly slaves with buckets of water who could put it out really easily. Oh, thank you. Oh, no. I just got these burly slaves with their buckets of water in case the fire spreads to one of my properties. However, I would be willing to put out this fire right here if you sold it to me for, we'll say 2 talents of silver. What? It's worth like 20 times that. No, I'm sure it was, but right now, honestly, it looks like it's a rapidly depreciating asset. I'm sitting right here willing to take it off your hands before it's worthless, because I'm such a good guy, you see. Please, Crassus, for the love of Jupiter, show me the mercy a politician should always show their citizens. 1 talent of silver. My God, my home, my livelihood, my collection of prized monkeys from exotic lands. Should have put them on the blockchain, brother. Anyway, if you're looking for a new house, I'd gladly sell you this one for 10 talents of silver. What? Yeah, it's a crazy good deal, right? It's just full of potential now that I've fixed it up a bit. All you did was put out the fire. All right, you drive a hard bargain, I'll throw in some monkey ashes for free. This was a common Crassus move. Yes, Crassus was a 21st century man in the, negative 1st century. He was the original Sigma male. Literally, Plutarch's Life of Crassus, which was one of the sources for this video, Plutarch literally opens the entire thing talking about how Crassus was always hanging around this Vestal Virgin, his cousin actually. I don't think I've talked about the Vestal Virgins before, but they were of incredible significance to the Roman religion. Like, they literally maintained the city of Rome's eternal flame. They were a big deal. And obviously, as you judge from the name, they had to be virgins. So, since Crassus was always hanging around this woman and buttering her up and being all sweet, he ended up going to trial because they thought, oh, well, he's clearly fucking this broad. And Crassus said, oh, no. She has a really nice villa outside of the city, and I'm trying to buy it. Above all else, Crassus understood how to make money during a crisis. And once again, he lived during the literal fall of the Roman Republic, so there were a lot of them, and this fucker got paid. If Crassus lived during the War on Terror, he would have sold flying lessons to Al-Qaeda and jumper cables to Americans. But what did he do with this money? He bought politicians. Turns out they're cheap. Running for office in Rome was a massive expense. You had to wine and dine and entertain the population to win support. So Crassus would loan these aspiring senators money, allowing him to exercise considerable power over them if they won. Pompey's accomplishments in the East were very impressive. Cat, I'm gonna fucking kill you. Now, Pompey's accomplishments in the East were very, very impressive. A great deal of what he'd done had been making alliances, installing puppet kings, and drawing borders. This all had to be ratified by the Senate, and it was here that he ran into issues. This might surprise you, but Pompey had a lot of opponents. The more popular a politician became to the public, the more dangerous he became to his peers. Once again, there were no political parties in ancient Rome. Roman politics was many things, but it was not a team sport. Crassus in particular worked against Pompey. Crassus would in fact support an alternative to Pompey, so as to siphon support from him. Crassus needed a charismatic populare, a real champion of the people, someone unstained by Sulla's bloody civil war which had just occurred, a politician named Dramatic Sting.